All right. Aurora Borealis is a, let's call them a blackened death metal band from, let's see, Maryland. I think they originally might have formed in, the idea might have started in Atlanta. It might have moved to Florida at some point, but the main guy has been in Maryland for quite some time, Ron Vento. And most people would place a band like Aurora Borealis somewhere between Angel Corpse, Early Nile, and Absu. And probably because, they're definitely were around and sort of in an innovative sense, combining black metal and death metal to a high technical standard uh, at an era where it wasn't being commonly done with any real sense or done well. So Aurora Borealis to me are important definitely early on. They have a really interesting story because the original guitarist from Hallows Eve, I think, was putting together a black death metal band called Les Tragus Nosferatus, and Ron Vento was the guitarist in that situation, and I think co-songwriter. So he left that band and formed his own, and took some of those songs for his first demo, and eventually they ended up on his first EP. But it really has been uh, an impressive both do-it-yourself and self-directed experience from the guy since then, and that's really impressive that he kept it DIY until it got big enough to where they have worked with a couple of bigger labels. Now they're on Hammerheart, so that's pretty good distribution in general. Um, Now, so what do they sound like? I think that it'll cue you in that I mentioned Angel Corpse well enough, especially if you think of the first Angel Corpse album. But the technical level at which Vento plays the guitar and sings in a certain diction, to me, it reads a little bit. It does really into the sort of peak Absu-esque, definitely the post Absu Terra version of that band. But here the death metal influences are much more key as far as riffcraft, and I think that's the most important part of jumping into an Aurora Borealis record, is that the thrashing death metal uh, side of the band is the important aspect of it, and the vocals are just a bit blackened. They have so many records that I could go over. I definitely have my favorites along the way, but the important thing to really remember is that it has been a solo project, but he's picked up very talented drummers often before they sort of broke out with sort of better known bands. Probably the most obvious one being Tony Laureano for the first EP and I think one album, and then various other drummers over time. The drummer he's been working with since 2011, which is what is it? I forget his name. Uh, yeah, we Mark Green. There he is. Um, Generally, since 2011, the band has been on a similar thread, and it's a great peak of professional um, performance, and uh, everything meets Ron Vento's standard. And I think it's really important it's such a high standard, it's probably difficult to meet with any sort of regular frequency. So it's impressive that they've managed a string of four very good albums, beyond a couple that kind of they got a little iffy in terms of the production values, and some of the mixes were a little bit off on some of those records. I think that adds character. I think it makes them all sound different, and it's great to revisit. But I understand where consistency is king when you're iterating. Um, so the way I feel about this record is it's sort of a better version of what they were doing with in 2011 with I don't own the record, so I don't remember the name of it. But yeah, before World Shapers found the right mix, the right math, the right render. And then Apocalypse added a little bit more black metal back into their sound after the World Shapers had been a little bit more brutal and a little more riff oriented, but a little bit more riff salad. So Prophecy is the mold in which history is poured, basically irons out the riff salad and to the point where everything has intention and place and enough room to breathe, whereas the brutality and the energy and the death metal influences can kind of sink in a little bit more. What we get is one of the most well-rounded and best rendered Aurora Borealis records to date. And keeping in mind, I'm really very much more a fan of their earliest stuff, their late 90s and like Northern Lights and all that, the early 2000s. So I really think they sort of had sort of nailed it on the last three records, but this one is especially fine and especially representative. Um, Naturally, it's the latest one. It's going to sound the best in most cases, and at this point, well, what's special about this one versus the others is probably the consistency of the lyrical theme threaded throughout, the sort of blend of really impressive technical feats and just catchy guitar riffs and grooves. It still manages to be a riff-oriented album with sense and not just a frantic, manic mess. Now, don't get me wrong, I love frantic, manic, death thrash metal records. Those are some of my favorites, but this one really just hits every beat along the way. And then, for me, it drags on by just a little bit, but otherwise, a very high standard for this form of like thrashing, still a little bit old school, black death metal, with no real fuckery, no cringy bullshit. It's just a very good, very solid band putting out one of their better records. So easy recommendation for me. Definitely one of my higher recommendations of the month overall, and probably worth picking up if you kind of lost track of the band over the years. So there you go. Check it out yourself.